Hey everybody, welcome back to the Badgerland Birding Podcast, bringing you birding news and stories from the Badger State and beyond. Today we're with Mathew Radford, who runs the Bird's Eye View podcast, and he's a birder in Oklahoma. He's also done a lot of birding in other parts of the U.S. and in Idaho as well. So how's it going, Mathew?
It's going very well. I'm excited to chat with you guys. How are things going in Wisconsin?
Doing well. And you were commenting on Ryan's got his classic Buccaneers sweatshirt, and you grew up in Idaho, but you're a Buccaneers fan. So how did that happen?
Yeah, I was on the playground at Harwood Elementary in sixth grade, just all the boys talking about favorite teams and who they like, who they don't. Looking over all these logos, I thought, ooh, I love creamsicles. Those are tasty. Look at these creamsicle Buccaneers. Something about them, I said, I'm going to love the Buccaneers. I was kind of undecided. I almost went with the Eagles. And
Oh,
then everyone immediately started mocking me over my selection. I doubled down and said, well, I'm too stubborn not to go with this now. So I made the decision right there in the playground. I was a Buccaneers fan, and the rest is history, as they say. And we got our Super Bowls
I like
finally.
that you stuck with it. You stuck to your
Oh
guns
yeah,
there.
that seemed like
absolutely.
a defining moment in your life. Like I'm the doubling down guy. Like people don't like
Yeah,
what I'm doing. I'm gonna double down on it.
Well, I
yeah.
personally believe that the Buccaneers creamsicle jerseys are among the best uniforms in all of sports, and their logo is so classy. It's for those of you that don't know what the Buccaneers logo looks like and can't see right now, it is a pirate that some have described as a dandy pirate with a feather in his cap, with a sword in his mouth, winking at those looking at the logo. Like, how can you beat that? That's an incredible logo.
The best. And of course, people always ask, would you rather have a team that is just perpetually horrible, but you have a couple peaks when you win a Super Bowl? And I would choose that any day. And that's what we've been. We have the worst record still in the NFL historically, but
Really?
we
Even
have
worse
yeah,
than the Browns.
we have the worst still in the NFL overall as a percentage. I think the Arizona Cardinals are the second worst, but we have two Super Bowls, so it that's almost been part of the fun, just that perpetually bad team thinking we can do this, we can do this. So
Yeah, I mean, they're not bad now. They're middle of the
yeah.
road now.
Although
They
the
need to be
Chris
better.
Godwin injury looked pretty bad the other
Yeah,
day.
that's
Yeah.
yeah, we may make the playoffs, but it could be it could be a long slog now.
Yeah, we'll see. There's you guys could trade for a good receiver or something. There's some out there.
You know what's
Yeah,
weird though is that you didn't go with the Eagles considering that you love birds. And you've loved birds for a while.
I know. And you know who I really like in the AFC is because I also love poetry. I've written a lot of poetry, and that is
Ravens.
the Ravens. Such a cool, just the whole thing, choosing the Ravens and Baltimore and Edgar Allan Poe. That it's a great mascot, great team. I love Corvid. So they're definitely my AFC favorite.
It's way
So then in
cooler when
baseball,
it
Blue Jays.
Hmm?
So for baseball, do you cheer for the Blue Jays?
You know, I got into loving snakes, so I really like the Arizona Diamondbacks.
We're all over the map with like the
Yeah.
states of teams you cheer for,
Yeah,
and
I
I'm
was
here for
I was
that.
saying it's way cooler though when a team is picked based off like some history, like the Packers. Than just like, oh, we're the Leopards, New
I thought
England
you said the
Leopards or
lepers.
whatever.
I was like,
Oh,
what team is
that
the lepers? I feel like we're gonna have an entire birds and sports podcast at some point, like just an episode discussing birds and sports and the history and the significance and everything. That would be pretty cool.
That would be fun. I would be happy to interject my thoughts when you have one.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us a little bit about how you started with the Bird's Eye View podcast. How did that come to be?
You know, I've always loved birds and birding. Probably more recently, maybe 2021, started being more involved in the broader birding community. Really wasn't even on eBird until then. Started paying attention to podcasts, and I'm just naturally curious. I like to bump into people and then ask them questions. What are you up to? Where are you from? What do you do? I think I'm a question asker and intuitive. And my partner, Virginia, kept telling me, you really should do a podcast. You just need to do a podcast.
It's like you just talk so much.
Yeah, exactly. Like, save some of this for other people. So uh, it was just that. It's naturally being inquisitive. I love the broader birding community. I think ultimately, the more we shed light on birds, to more and more people, it's going to ultimately lead to their conservation. So I think I'm trying to be a little altruistic and shed light on birds and get people more involved. And it's truly just fun for me. It's just a labor of love. I love talking to people, learning about them, and I've had just really fun guests from Alaska to Florida, and like you guys have, it's just so fun to talk to people.
What's the biggest thing you feel like you've learned from doing your podcast?
I've learned that there are just so many more people than you'd ever realize that are out there working for birds.
Mm.
From field techs to other podcasters, there's just this birding community is so much more vast than I thought. For many years, thought there's not many people that really care about birds like I do, but it's been shocking that even in a local county here, just so many people that love birds. If you really become part of this larger birding community, it's just uncovering really a great network of people.
Yeah, definitely. What is the Oklahoma scene like to you? Because we've talked with Alex Harmon, we've gone there. There's some really awesome places, like Gloss Mountain, the Wichita Mountains. What are some of the kind of more underrated places or places that you think are worth visiting in the state that other people might not have on their list?
And what part of it do you live in and hang out in most often?
Okay, I'll start with that last question first. So we're in Tulsa County, which is northeastern Oklahoma, pretty close to the Arkansas. We can be in Arkansas maybe a little over an hour, so not too far from the Ozarks. We're really on that extension of the eastern forests that really ended here. So we still get occasional sightings in the county of, say, Louisiana water thrush, uh, scarlet tanager, rose-breasted grosbeak, some of them that just barely get here. As far as the state as a whole, people don't realize what a great mix of east and west it is. So in the Panhandle, I have a good friend, Steve Metz, that owns a house in Kenton, and he gets just all the classic western species in the Panhandle. So you can go out there and get burrowing owl, Say's phoebe, ferruginous hawk, inappropriate time of year, just classic western. It's a rocky desert, western diamondback, prairie rattlesnake kind of area. You get down in the southeastern part of the state, red slough, it's the classic anhinga, roseate spoonbill, white ibis. Now, some of these I think are more not always there, but seasonally and sometimes rarely there. But that, I mean, there's alligators. So in the state, you can get alligators in red slough and western diamondback rattlesnakes in the panhandle. In the central part of the state, there's some areas that just couldn't be turned over for the plow. So some of the remnant grasslands were saved. So we still have a remnant population of greater prairie chicken, great
Oh.
wintering areas for Smith's longspur. You get down into the Wichita Mountains, of course, on the Texas border, the northern extent of the range of the black-headed or black-cap vireo, uh, rare species everyone likes to go see. So it's really a diverse state. Amazingly, though, I've kind of skipped over some of those areas. I have still not been to the Panhandle. I've zipped by on the way to Arizona, New Mexico. I've zipped past Red Slough to go to the Gulf Coast. I still need personally to visit those two extreme areas, but we're in a fun area here that we still get the eastern warbler. So if we poke around enough in a year, we can get 24, 25 species of warblers coming through here. My son got a golden winged warbler here this year. We got Cape May, Blackburnian, chestnut sided, blackpoll. We can get some really good classic eastern warblers here if we look hard enough. There's not a lot of them, but they're coming through here.
And you guys had a cool experience with a roadrunner recently, didn't you?
Yeah, again, that's a bird that Western species, they're starting to get to be a lot more of them. They're in Arkansas, they're in Oklahoma here, but you don't find a lot of them. We still have not found one in Tulsa County. We work full time. We're kind of bound here, so we're kind of doing a bit of a Tulsa County big year by default, I guess. Still hadn't found one, even though dozens of people had. So finally got out Saturday. It was kind of funny because it reminded me of maybe a cryptid experience. We're driving down a road. Virginia was with me. I saw this little side road, a dark shadow, and then there was this creature standing there in the shadow. I kind of zipped by and I thought, wait, what was that? Put it in reverse, backed up. Sure enough, there was a roadrunner standing there. So I I almost called it a little Sasquatch, but it was in fact a roadrunner. And got our first road runner for the year, 241 for the county for the year.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Ryan has to go in a little bit. So I want to jump ahead to kind of the cryptid talk that we normally do.
Sweet. Nice.
So
Did you see that segue I did there?
yeah, I know you're also very interested in these topics. So have you had any experiences with anything creepy or paranormal besides roadrunners, the little Sasquatches? Anything out there?
I have personally not heard so much as a bump in the night myself. I spent time around enough people that I've had a couple of good friends, a couple family members, a couple coworkers that have, as the topic came up, said, "Well, I had something happen," and they relate stories. I've never had anything happen, so it's still just secondhand information. But I've had people that I trust and know well tell me about things they've seen and heard that I know they're not lying to me. I wasn't there with them, but I just tend to think they had something happen. Or I know they had something happen. I just don't know exactly what it was, and they don't know what it was for sure. But yeah, it enough to the point where I think something is out there. I don't think people are lying, but at the same time, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of it, I guess.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about some cryptids that are birds or bird related. So the
Yeah.
most common one, and we will discount ivory-billed woodpecker because we know it did in fact exist 100% sure. I think
May
the
still be
most
out there, we don't know.
may still be out there. I think the most famous one from North America, at least, is the thunderbird, which is very interesting. People back as far back as native cultures had sightings of large birds, particularly they thought that they were related to storms that would come in. And the question is, what could they have been, and could they still be out there? Because people still do report seeing large birds in the sky. What are your thoughts on that phenomenon of the thunderbird? Did it exist? What could it have been?
Wow.
I know I put you on the
Again, I
spot with that. It wasn't planned at all. I
no,
just unloaded a lot.
no, that's great. And I'll give you how I feel about all this since I haven't had have any personal experiences. I've heard and read enough accounts of whether it's Yeenod Lushi, the skinwalker, or Bigfoot or Sasquatch or Thunderbirds. I've read some of these things or heard accounts of people. I don't think all these people are lying. They saw something. So I think it's very unlikely that this is all made up. I think something happened to these people. They saw something. But at the same time, I think it seems so unlikely that we wouldn't have evidence of some of these if they really exist. And I know that's not a very definitive answer, but I think something is out there that people see. How that's manifested, I have no idea because I don't think all these people are lying. I tend to stop short of thinking it's, we they use the term woo or paranormal, but at the same time, maybe there's things out there we don't quite understand. I'm really in a quandary about it because I'm the type that if there's something out there, just like a lifer, I want to see it. I mean, if can you imagine if there's a real cryptid, if there's a real Bigfoot or Sasquatch, that's something you'd have to kind of drop what you're doing to go try to get a look at it. So
A report
I
just came through. We gotta go now.
yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I think something is out there in some of these realms, but I don't know how it is that they manifest themselves to some people, yet they stay so distant from real scientific confirmation.
As far as the Thunderbird thing, like my top thing it probably could have been would be like Golden Eagle. Because even sometimes when, you see them and they're there, you're like, dang, that's a huge bird. Or like a California condor. And then you think about the Stellar Sea Eagle that showed up in the United States. If people didn't have cameras back then and they were talking about this massive bird they saw that shouldn't even be here. Like one, who's going to believe that they saw a Stellar Sea Eagle? And two, it's going across the US, multiple people seeing that. That would be something that would probably shake people up a little bit.
That's a really good point you raise, actually, is because there are birds that get so far blown off course. And what kind of thing brings in off course birds? Weather patterns. When the wind picks up, when a pattern is coming across from east or west to east, birds are generally going to be pushed along with those patterns. Or we saw with hurricanes, we had the hurricane obviously in the southeast recently. We had a purple gallinule up in Wisconsin, presumably probably blown in from that hurricane. A species like a harpy eagle could it have made it up here and people have seen it?
I don't know about that one.
I
Maybe.
don't
Who
know. There's
knows?
a stellar seagull was here, so I mean, who knows what it all could be?
And size is a tricky thing. I know I've been out in the woods and seen a small creature, and my depth perception was off, and it appeared to be a large creature further back, like the size of a deer. And I realized, oh, that's a squirrel that's 15 feet from me. It's not a deer that's way back there. Our eyes can play tricks on us. A smaller bird flying over wooded cover or whatever, someone could look up and think they're seeing a much larger bird. You never know.
Or if it was just larger than what they usually see. So,
Yeah.
if you see a lot of crows and suddenly one day you see a raven, you're kind of like, whoa, look at that thing. That thing's big. So I would love to research Thunderbird sightings more and learn more about that phenomenon and try to really figure out what it could have been. And there's other birds too that I think probably related to cryptozoological creatures and things like that.
People
Yeah.
still say they see like pterosaurs and stuff, but then sometimes you look at like cranes and storks in flight and they look pretty pterosaur-like. So I feel like a lot of the bird mythology, I feel like you can relate to known species
There's a
more
lot
than
of
other things.
creatures in South America, Africa too that are supposed to be flying cryptids that make specific noises that definitely could be related to owls too.
Yeah, well, on the podcast last week, we were talking about barn owls and how creepy the young look. Like somebody looked up in their attic and they saw these young barn owls and they looked just like aliens.
Yeah.
And like that stuff would really freak you out back in the day if you didn't have anyone to consult and you're just like, I got these
Back
aliens
in
in
the
my
day.
attic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
So so do you guys think any of this could get into that realm of super kind of natural, that it's part of a realm that we're just not aware of currently?
I am not smart enough to discount it. I don't know enough about the way that the world works to say that that's not a possibility.
That's kind of where I am, probably.
I mean,
Neil
it's
deGrasse
hard to
Tyson might
say.
disagree.
What was that? Oh,
I
Neil
said
deGrasse
Neil
Tyson.
deGrasse Tyson might disagree.
I think it's fair to be open to things that, people don't understand, but I do feel like we had this experience one time, Ryan, when we were out looking for I think it was the Northern Lights, and we ran into this couple and somehow we started talking about Sasquatch. They're like, yeah, we have it on our property, and they come out of these portals and it just went way down the rabbit hole to the point where my eyes glossed over and I'm like, okay,
I was
I'm
interested.
not,
What
yeah,
was
Ryan
that?
was going full on with it. He's like, tell me more about these portals and all
Show
this
me your
stuff.
portal.
But at that point, I was kind of checked out of like, okay, this is probably not, something that's happening. But I don't
Yeah,
know. Who knows?
it's hard to say. Yeah. And I tend to, people that say they've had ongoing experiences and they've seen them on the farm, and there's family groups and they interact with them and feed them, and it gets to a point where you'd say it, then it's unlikely that you wouldn't have documented this somehow. I mean, I tend to believe people that had some very tangential experience and they saw them quickly and briefly and they don't know what it was, and moved on with their life, but they just can't put a finger on
Sasquatch, he stood up in my wedding.
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I never thought to take a picture though.
And on that note, I'll leave you guys to the bird talk.
Thank you for participating in the cryptozoology portion.
I thought you were gonna say cryptocurrency. We're talking about Dogecoin.
That's another podcast, probably. All right, we'll
Thanks.
see you around. So Mathew, tell us a little bit about birding in Idaho, because I feel like that's a place that I've heard a lot of good things about. Our friend Matt Miller, I believe he lives there and he does a lot of fishing and he just says it's kind of an underrated place. Do you think it's underrated?
Oh, absolutely. Just not many people there birding, first of all. And it's like Oklahoma got such a great diversity. So the panhandle really is sandwiched between Washington and Montana, and it's an extension of those boreal forests to the north. So you get clear up there north of Coeur d'Alene, Lake Pend Oreille, all that, chestnutback chickadee, boreal chickadee, even northern water thrushes, American red starts, red-eyed vireos, all those northern birds are nesting down in there. So yeah, so great boreal forest stuff. And then that extends clear down through the Continental Divide, so clear down close to Yellowstone National Park. Even in the summer, not just in the winter, you can get great gray owls, boreal owls, all those great species. So Northern Panhandle down through the Continental Divide, great boreal forest birds. Most of southern Idaho has been converted to agriculture, but you have that remnant, uh, some marshland, some reservoirs associated with a Snake River. So great numbers of waterfowl, snow geese, Ross's geese, all that. And then all those boreal species will descend down into the valley occasionally. So I grew up in the upper Snake River Valley. The Snake River descends down through the southern part of Idaho. So I grew up, and we were lucky we had great gray owls. We had short-eared owls, long-eared owls, even saw-whet owls, really within 10, 15 miles of the farm. So a lot of it's been converted to agricultural habitat, a lot of invasive, like Russian olive trees, etc., a lot of willows, non-native willows, but those owls seem to have adapted to it. So it's a great place for owls in the southeast part of the state. I go back there in the winter and it can get, with my buddy Darren Clark, can get, again, a bunch of great gray owls, find 5 to 6 of them on a weekend, soft-whet owls, long-eared owls, short-eared owls. So great state for that. It's really well known now, I think, for raptors. You get out in the central part of the state, and they'll find hundreds of rough-legged hawks, great numbers of prairie falcons, ferruginous hawks. Just these remnant lava fields out in the middle of the state, really good winter areas for raptors. So, and then of course, up in the hills there, you got McGillivrary's warblers, Virginia's warblers, and actually in the extreme southern parts of the state, Virginia's warblers, bush tits. There's really some open kind of scrubby type habitat, kind of extension of that gray vireo, Woodhouse's scrub jay type habitat you get in Utah, Nevada, up into Idaho. So similar similar to Oklahoma, it's very diverse from the boreal forests up north down to the extreme sagebrush down in the state. So it's a great state. And you said you had not been there, correct?
No, I think Ryan like went through it once, but I've never been there, but it's on my list of places to go.
Yeah, and then of course now the endemic breeder there, if it stays a species, is Casa crossbill. So that's
Right, yeah.
that's in those southern piney forests, just a little north of the mountains where you can get Himalayan snowcock in Nevada. So
Well, I heard that they actually paid, the state of Idaho paid to get cash across bill of species just for the ecotourism, just to make
exactly.
people have to go to Idaho. I'm kidding, of course, but it is a draw for birders then. If they want that on their year list, they do have to go to Idaho then to get it, which is pretty cool.
It is. I'm trying to think. I don't believe it's a year-round resident, so it's probably the only state that has an endemic year-round resident, I think.
Interesting. Um,
Or I mean, except like maybe Alaska or Hawaii, but of the lower 48, I should say.
well, you got a yellow-billed magpie in California, right?
Oh, you're
I'm
right.
sure
You're
there's
right.
some we're not thinking
There's
of,
got to be
but
some
that's a
others. Yeah.
that's a pretty
Yeah.
cool one. Are the
Yeah.
potatoes amazing in Idaho? Like it's
They are
supposed to be,
amazing.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
So it holds
And
up.
it's a function of elevation. We have those long, cold, 5,000 foot elevation nights in the fall, and those potatoes sequester sugar and they get big and heavy and dense. So in fact, I was looking at the local Walmart here, and like I've been unable to find Idaho potatoes recently, so I've stopped eating potatoes. I gotta find another supplier of Idaho potatoes.
Are they significantly better? Like, can you tell the difference?
I can, yeah. It's all about that density. They are thicker, heavier for bakers. If you're cutting them up into fries, like a lot of them are, probably can't tell the difference, but a big, good baker potato, you can tell if it's a Idaho potato.
Gotcha. And so what's the rarest bird you've seen in Idaho?
It was a Siberian center back in 1995 or the winter of 95, 96. I was in college at Idaho State. Yeah, beautiful bird.
Yeah, that
And
black like kind of face mask is really striking. That's very cool.
and I got an old film picture of it. I need to track that down, but yeah, just a beautiful bird. It was back in the days of you had to call a hotline to get
Hmm.
rare bird sightings. My professor, Dr. Charles Trost at Idaho State, called and said, "Hey, they got to go get this bird." So a buddy of mine, I worked for Fish and Game at the time, and we hoofed it out to the middle central part of Idaho. Got a gyrfalcon on the way to get this bird. So I had a Siberian Ascenter, Rosy Finch, gyrfalcon day. It was pretty fun. Didn't realize how good it was until I years later.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal. That kind of reminds me of the first year we went birding. There was a gyrfalcon like further south at a place called Buena Vista Grasslands, and it was our first year of birding, and we had just basically drove there and we ended up seeing it. And I don't know if we've seen one since then. That might be the only one we've ever seen. But it's kind of
Wow.
funny, these things that you see earlier, you don't necessarily know how rare or special it is until it doesn't happen for like 6, 7, 10 years later.
Oh yeah. And did you have a tip or did you find it?
Oh no, we knew it was there. It was
Okay.
it was pretty rare because that's the same place where we have our greater prairie chicken population. So it was actually there eating the prairie chickens, which isn't great for the conservation efforts.
That's
But it had
funny.
a big supply of food all winter. But yeah, people would go there and look for it, and it was kind of hit or miss. And we got lucky that we were able to see it with some other birders.
Yeah, amazing birds. Yeah, Idaho is a state. I would love to spend a lot more time out there birding. I know there's got to be some great birds out there somewhere, probably some rarities, but it's hard to get back there now and especially find time once I'm there to really bird seriously. And again, I've never seen Casa Crossbill, so I left the state before I was super serious birding. And of course, it wasn't even a species then. So
Mhm.
I have some low hanging fruit as far as Idaho lists. I need to get back and bird Idaho a little more.
Yeah, how hard are the cash crossbill to find? Do you know? Like, are they pretty reliable?
I think they're pretty reliable. Yeah. Yeah. And then I've again this broader birding community. I know a few people I think I would contact and some seasonal workers there that are there studying them. So give them a call before I traveled out there and they'd get us right on them.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be a cool one to see. Is
It
there
would.
a place that's your next bucket list birding location that you really want to go to?
Yeah, I think in the US, of course, I really want to get out and start birding outside the US, probably down to Oaxaca, Mexico would be fun. But in the US, I think California.
Hmm.
There's just so many. I've not been on a pelagic. I think would like to go to Half Moon Bay and go on those classic pelagics, get a bunch of those. And then there's still some, I still need probably what a lot of people consider some easy birds in California. I need California thrasher, California gnatcatcher. Uh, yeah, they're pretty simple birds. So probably go out there with Rachel Clark actually and bird a couple days with her and then take a pelagic over a weekend. And then of course, Alaska, Hawaii would be awesome. I've been to Alaska, but I was a knucklehead and wasn't birding at the time. I was just fishing.
I mean,
I
that's
could have
pretty
had a
cool too, though.
Yeah, it was fun. There was a period of time in life I just for about 2 decades got into life and work and didn't bird and went to Alaska 4 times fishing hard. And I took a few pictures of birds. So thankfully I went back through and I realized I got some good lifers just retroactively, I guess, that I took pictures of. And I remember observing the birds, but I definitely need to go back to Alaska, get some birds. I still need I still need some classic northern birds, black-backed and three-toed woodpeckers, boreal chickadees, some of those. So
Yeah, I honestly think it's one of my favorite places to go birding in a spot where almost everything is new. Because
yeah.
then even the common birds are so exciting. Like we were talking about birding in Europe earlier today, and if you went there, just I was just said I'd probably spend like 2 hours photographing European robins and just taking videos of them and watching them because everything is pretty much new for you then, and you know it's going to be a good trip, even if you don't necessarily see anything rare. I think those are some of my favorite ones because you know it's going to be good regardless of what else happens.
Yeah. And I only have, I know a lot of people have gotten to 700 species in the US. I'm about 560. So I still have several of those days ahead where I can get to an area and get 15, 20 lifers. Again, mostly on the West Coast. Yeah, I still look forward to that.
Yeah, I feel like a pelagic trip would be killer for you. You probably get at least 10 to 20 lifers, depending on what you guys all hit on. Because we did our first pelagic out of Westport, Washington
Oh,
earlier this year, and that was really neat seeing the different community of birds because you have the storm petrels that actually they were a lot smaller than we thought, and they kind of acted like nighthawks out on the water. So they were like really fast wing beats, kind of bat-like flight. which I didn't
Okay.
expect at all. You don't really get that from the pictures because in the pictures it's all blown up and you think it's this big bird, but they're actually these very little birds. And then seeing the huge albatrosses and the Jaegers and kind of anything you see might be like a new lifer. So it's pretty exciting.
Oh, cool.
Hopefully you don't get
And
seasick though.
I was going to say, how did you do? Because I'm really prone to motion sickness. When I fished in Alaska, I would put scopolamine patches
Yep.
on, but what it would do is affect my vision, which
Oh.
isn't good for birding. So I have to figure it out. I don't know if it'll affect my distant vision or not. But did you have to use some scopolamine?
So I don't know if I needed to, but we were actually with a doctor, and so he recommended we do the patch the night before. So we put it on before we went
Okay.
to bed, and then had it on through the whole thing, and then took it off like a couple hours after. I haven't historically ever gotten seasick, but I didn't know about Ryan, so we kind of all just did it as a precaution because I heard if you are, it kind of ruins your whole trip. So it was like
Oh
a
well,
better safe than sorry type deal.
well, that's cool. And so you guys got probably dozen, 20 lifers or
I think it was
so.
like about 12-ish. It was
Nice.
it was pretty solid though. We had a good trip.
So enough that you have that feeling of getting a ton of them, but not so many you couldn't appreciate them all.
No, and it kind of came in waves too. So as like we went out further, we started seeing the sooty shearwaters and the pink footeds. So you have some time to appreciate those before you get into like the next bird you saw. And then when we were way offshore, then we started on the way out, we saw the storm petrels, then you get to the albatrosses. So it kind of comes in waves where it's not necessarily super overwhelming. If you'd never seen any of the inshore birds, that could be like common murre. If you'd never seen those, that might be a little overwhelming. But for us, we'd been to the Oregon area and seen some of the birds just off the coast. So we had those under our belt. So I feel like we had time that it was like striated enough to appreciate each thing.
Oh, nice. Yeah, and I even need some like I even need Herman's goal. So there's some classics I'll get right on the bank before we get out there.
Yeah, for sure. I think pelagic should be on everybody's birding bucket list. There's a couple different things that I'm like, as a birder, you need to do that. Like, I feel like experiencing crazy migration, well, whether it's at High Island, Cape May, or like McGee Marsh, like that's on every bucket list. Kind of the five hotspot destinations: South Florida, South Texas, Southeast Arizona, like South Central California, and then like Sax-Zim area. There's just certain things that kind of I feel like every birder needs to do. What are some of those things that you think everyone should experience?
Yeah, definitely trying to get in on some uh that cross Gulf warbler activity down at High Island, Boy Scout Woods. Definitely. We've done that once, and they even said it was a pretty slow warbler day, but still we got 20 species of warbler. So, and you can do that in a lot of areas, though. I think even I my best warbler day was in Iowa, where I had probably 25 species of warblers in one kind of foggy, misty afternoon. Got so many good warblers migrating through. So, yeah, definitely an eastern warbler migration day. Absolutely deep South Texas. So from South Padre down around to the Brownsville dump and Brownsville, Paris, just that whole area there was so good for a weekend. We love Salanino further up the Rio Grande there, Salanino, try to get more or less seed eater. That whole area is such a great place to bird. And then, yeah, as you mentioned, Southeast Arizona, everyone should go there. I've been blessed now to go in the winter once and spring once, so I officially kind of had chances at most every bird there. I still have a couple we missed, but everyone's got to spend time in those areas. And you really have to go back two or three times realistically, but even once, if you've not been, it's so fun just to shovel in those lifers. And then I speak to myself now, you have to get to California, do a pelagic, especially out of Half Moon Bay. I cannot wait to do that. That'll be fun.
Yeah, what did you like better for Southeast Arizona, winter or more spring?
Oh, spring for sure. Just the number of species, and it was fun. We went to Madeira Canyon first in the winter, so the canyon was dry, or the creek was dry. We did get that one lone male trogon that was hanging around.
That's
Um,
nice.
but it was just so incredibly full of life in the spring. It was just a whole different world. Lucy's, Virginia's warblers, probably 12 species of hummingbirds across New Mexico and Arizona, all the red-faced, Grace's warblers across the two states. So yeah, spring is just crazy fun. And I don't think there's much you can get in the winter. Correct me if I'm wrong, you can't get in the spring. So certainly someone that feels like they can't get there more than once should go in the spring, maybe later in the summer if they have a real monsoon uh pulse of breeding activity. But yeah, spring was just it was so fun. I thought I would get maybe 12 lifers, and we did find a kid, and we went out with a guide one day of our week and a half, and he got us all the little extra species I don't think we would have gotten. So I ended up with 21 species. It was so fun. Yeah.
Solid. Yeah, I don't know too much about the difference between winter and like if there's anything there in the winter you can't get. I know they recently just had a yellow grosbeak down there. So kind of seems most times of the year something rare could pop up
Yeah.
in Arizona or just cross the border and then, be in the US instead of Mexico. So always good to bird out in Arizona.
Oh yeah. And then we when we first went, my son and I in the winter, we were able to get painted redstart. They were still hanging around. And of course the feeders, they still have all the yellow-eyed juncos, Arizona woodpecker. So there's still a ton of birds there in the winter. And we got Rivoli's hummingbird. In fact, we got to Madera Canyon and it started to sleet and kind of rainy, sleety stuff. And then this Rivoli's hummingbird flew up and was trying to kind of bathe in this wet, sleety. Felt sorry for the poor thing, but it was kind of wild to see a Rivoli's hummingbird with sleet and almost snow collecting on its back there in Madera Canyon. But those hummingbirds stay there and at Patton Hummingbird Center all winter, some of the species. So it's a good opportunity.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. It's hard for me to picture snow in Arizona because I've never been there in the winter or anything like that. But I heard like Mount Lemon gets pretty snowy, right? A lot of those areas do actually get snow capped.
Yeah, for sure. And then we ran into snow in first of May when we went up there and got we went up to Mount Lemon and got olive warbler. And
Nice.
we found pockets of snow on some shaded corners. There were still 2 foot drifts of snow in those canyons there. So they must get, I bet they get, all those roads are probably closed in the winter due to snow, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Um, from when you started birding to, birding these days, what's the biggest thing that's changed?
For me, I'm old enough that it's definitely technology. So
Mhm.
I went to college in the 90s. So again, I had a great professor, Dr. Charles Trost, a real black-billed magpie lover there at Idaho State University. So, but it was the old days where everyone would call him if they had a rare bird alert. He would put it on a magnetic tape. People would call in and listen with a daily rare bird alert, and you'd hope it was still there. So, yeah, it's a whole different world now with eBird, social media, communication. You can find so many more birds, in a quick amount of time. And I just didn't have for that reason, I didn't have the resources. I think there were people around that loved to bird. I was in an area that in southeast Idaho, there weren't a lot of birders to begin with, but those that were there, you had no way of finding them, no way of communicating with them. So I think I always loved birds, my ability to really seek them out ebbed and flowed. But I love that today in this broader birding community with technology, we can just, yeah, as you know, you can be a part of 100 groups and get 100 alerts a day about every bird in the U.S. that on a need list. It's just, it's fun. I prefer this way. It's easier.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I read Ken Kaufman's book Kingbird Highway. I remember the way that information passed when he did his big year kind of I think he was a teenager and he would hitchhike across the US and you get kind of the secondhand information and there was one time I think people thought it was a rough. They thought it was some rare short. It may have been like a stint or something, but there was some bird everyone was seeing that they thought was super rare. And then one of the more experienced birders in like the sign-in book or whatever, he wrote, "Hey, unfortunately, this looks like it's actually like a pectoral sandpiper with some smudging on it or something like that." So just kind of this information of if that was today, pictures would get posted, someone would have that right away. people wouldn't have to go see it to then get that information. Like it just would have been a totally different world having the info move a little slower. And you're probably a lot easier to maximize your time and your species nowadays.
Oh yeah. I thought it would be fun sometime perhaps to just forego eBird, get off the alerts and everything, and just see in a year doing nothing but going out in habitat, finding birds myself, how many I could find without relying on eBird.
That
Certainly it would be a lot less than like this year. We have 241 in Tulsa County. It would be much, much less than that because a lot of that was chasing reports from other people. So it's still fun, but it's not a perfect indication of my own birding ability.
Yeah, it sounds like the birder version of primitive survival. You're like, let me go out in the woods without any
Yeah,
tools and see how I do.
yeah,
I
exactly.
Some people have a knack for they don't really want to chase stuff that's been found that's rare. They want to find their own stuff. So they'll just be like, yeah, let me go to the North Woods and just see what we find kind of thing. I don't know if it comes with experience necessarily or if it's just a certain type of person, but there's some people that just really love to do that. Like they don't necessarily want to find the rare stuff. They're like, I want to find my own stuff. And they just go out into these areas and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't.
Yeah, I talked with a Noah Arthur. You may have seen his name on Facebook. He's a California birder, and he just looks for rarities that he can find himself.
Mhm.
If someone else finds a rarity, he doesn't go chase it. He's solely interested in finding them himself, and he gets out there and he finds a lot of great warblers and gulls on the East Coast, or excuse me, on the West Coast. Like he said, well, I'm going to go. I have a trip out to the East Coast, so while I'm out there, I'm looking for Western warblers. Like his whole goal is just to be somewhere and find rare birds. They're there. It's really cool. I thought he doesn't chase other people's birds. He finds his own rarities. So
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about birding is it can just be whatever you want it to be. It's like if you love doing that, you can do that. If you want to just chase rarities, you can do that. If you want to watch your backyard feeders, you can do that. So I think there's something to be said with a hobby that allows you to be so diverse in how involved you want to be.
absolutely, it's a great endeavor, great community. I love it.
Yeah. What's your biggest advice for young birders?
It I would say immerse yourself in the bird and culture at whatever level you can. Be part of groups, attend local meetings, attend whatever events are out there, and then don't be afraid to ask questions. Most birders love to answer questions. I look back even a couple of years ago that I asked some really lame ID questions to some local experts. I like, and I look back now and think, well, I should have known that. That was pretty stupid, but they were very encouraging. They helped me out. So yeah, ask a lot of questions. Don't be afraid to and questions about where to go to bird, what kind of habitats, and what kind of ID skills you need. So, and people are in the birding community are all about that. And there's always local groups that are going out to bird. Going out with someone or a group is very beneficial. And then, and I think another important thing for young birders is to try to study and learn more about what birds need. So we love birds, we want to learn more about them, but learn about habitats, ecosystems, so we can do those things that we can have birds in 30 years or 50 years.
Yeah, definitely. I always preface the question thing with it's always good to ask questions, but it's also good to do your own research first. Because
Yeah,
sometimes on some of these bird groups, people ask it'll be like a bald eagle, and they'll be like, "What bird is
yeah,
this?" I'm like you could Google it, and I think you would find
yeah,
it. So yeah, asking questions, do a little research. People always appreciate it in the post with like, "Yeah, I've tried this and I can't figure it out," and doing that. But for sure, I feel like the birding community is pretty welcoming overall. So would definitely agree with all those tips. And
yeah. It's
lastly, where can people? Oh, go ahead.
always going to say, yeah, it's good to always ask for confirmation. Like, as
Yeah,
you
that's
said,
true.
come up with an ID, what you think it is, and then say, do you think it is this? That's what I think. So yeah, that is good advice. Put in some work and then ask someone for maybe confirmation, and then they can, if you are wrong, steer you in the right direction.
Yeah. Where can people find the podcast? And you also have some podcast merch as well, if people want, correct?
I don't have merch up yet. I'm gonna maybe toward the first of the year, which is coming up soon. It is Bird's Eye View podcast. an homage to the 70s and 80s when I grew up in Idaho, the retro 70s logo. So you can search for Bird's Eye View with the retro logo on the typical iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Um, I'm Mathew Radford with one T. If you look me up on Facebook, you see links to it. So, and then yeah, right now it's a standard audio only podcast. I think in around the first of the year, I'll get a website up and probably do a blog and some merchandise and all that stuff. So I do have some merch, but most of it is just kicking around my house, and I'll probably send a couple of these to Wisconsin. But
Sounds good. Well,
so
thanks so much for joining us, Mathew. Appreciate your time.
absolutely, thanks for putting up with my voice and my coughing while I'm getting over this illness here.
Oh, no problem. I feel like it just sounds a little more gravelly, so a little more distinguished,
Nice, appreciate it.
more like a boreal chickadee than a Carolina chickadee.
Perfect.
Well,
Thanks,
cool.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Mathew, and thanks to everyone for watching and listening to this episode of the Badgerland Birding Podcast.